Morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Akrami. I'm an Iranian-Canadian author and translator, and welcome to the second session that we are holding about IRGC and Flight PS752. A few months ago, I had a distinct privilege of interviewing the Honorable Michael Chong, member of the Canadian Parliament, Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Vice Chair of Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Now, I would like to inform you that the Honorable Michael Chong is joining us today in order to provide his remarks and expertise about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Flight PS752. Mr. Chong, it's been more than a year since downing of Flight PS752 by IRGC missiles, and the federal government still hasn't taken any significant action in order to hold the perpetrators of this crime accountable. Do you think that the Islamic Republic of Iran, with the help of IRGC, used the passengers of Flight PS752 as human shields for its own political aspirations? And why is there a delay from the federal government's side for seeking justice regarding this matter? Time is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and to everyone here on the call, I want to offer my deepest sympathies on your loss. It's something that many of us are mindful of as we deal with this issue. I can tell you a personal story. It's not the same as what you have gone through, but I lost both of my parents in car accidents suddenly. And while it's not the same thing as the accident that you have been through, the terrorist attack that you have been suffering through, I know what it's like to suddenly wake up one morning, suddenly lose two loved ones. And so I share your grief about your loss of your loved ones. It's a very difficult thing, particularly when it's so far away from where we are here in Canada, and when there isn't a open, transparent investigation, and there isn't accountability for the perpetrators of this crime. And so we are very mindful of that as we handle this issue and seek justice for you and your loved ones. Our view is that the Iranian regime is a threat to Canadians, and it is violating international law and human rights. There's a broader pattern at play here. Our view is that the government has been naive in its approach to the Iranian regime. They initially wanted to talk about re-engaging with Iran in a constructive way, and now I think they realize that is not going to happen, that the regime there is not interested in constructive engagement, and that it's not interested in seeking justice for the victims of Ukrainian flight PS752. We think that the IRGC should be listed as a terrorist entity. The government has refused to do so up to this point. Our view is that there's good grounds to list the entire organization as a terrorist entity, and that has yet to happen. That has yet to happen despite the fact that 3 years ago, Parliament adopted a motion calling on the government to do exactly that. And members of the government itself, the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, voted for that motion, and yet they failed to put it into action. And even yesterday, the Minister in front of committee indicated that he was not willing to do that. We also think that the government should be placing Magnitsky sanctions on individual Iranian government officials who are responsible for these gross violations of human rights. I think of Ms. Satudi, for example, who is a human rights lawyer who has been incarcerated. I think of so many other, national champion wrestlers who were just summarily executed. I think about so many other people who are voiceless and who have been persecuted or even put to death for simply living their lives and standing up for the things that we take for granted. So that's our perspective on Iran. We think that the Iranian people are our friends. The Iranian people have been suffering through this very punitive regime for so many decades. We saw the uprising in recent years where there was some hope that things would change, but unfortunately it hasn't. And we as a world community have to give support and hope to the people who are suffering through this regime. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chong. Now it is time for two family members of Flight PS 752 victims to share their concerns and questions with the Honorable Michael Chong. Each of you have 5 minutes. Mr. Gorgi, time is yours, sir.
Thank you, Michael, for your time and coming in our meetings. Well, the way liberal government as a diplomacy with Islamic regime actually it raises some serious concerns. The first is because the diplomacy, their diplomacy is soft, ineffective, and passive regarding Islamic regime. And first, it violates the basic fundamental value of Canadian and in the international community regarding human rights, because Islamic regime, and actually IRGC, and IRGC and Islamic regime, they are inseparable. At the end, they are the same. They are all the same. And well, the Islamic regime is on the top of the violation of human rights in the world. So that's the first. Dealing with a regime like this is against the value of Canadian and, as I said, the international community values. Second, this soft diplomacy and what we see concretely in the PS 752 shutting down, okay, that practically after more than 1 year and 3 months, the government of Canada didn't do anything meaningful and effective against the regime. And because that encouraged the terrorism activities of the regime, even in the future against the Canadian. Because if they see the regime, they see there is no consequences in doing such crimes. There's no serious consequences. So they encourage in the future, in whatever situation, they don't mind and they don't care about the reaction of the government of Canada, so they do whatever they do against the Canadian. That's exactly the case because, for example, they are afraid of United States reaction at the amid of that conflict, and even they asked the passenger of the flight if they have American passports, because they were afraid of American reactions to make sure that there is no casualty of United States citizen. But they don't care about Canadian citizen, and especially when they did this crime and they see no serious measures and reactions from the government of Canada, well, it encourages them to do in the future. Don't hesitate to do that. The second, so that's compromises this way of dealing with the situation compromises the security, national security of Canadian and Canadian people. The third is, regime of Iran and IRGC, they have the huge money laundering they did than they do in Canada. They invest in institutional, public institution, organization, NGOs, through the lobbyists, etc. And it's very well known, and everybody almost know about that, and for sure the government also. And that's a very big concern about interference, foreign interference. And they do really, we know that they do systematically to interference in the politics of Canada, in the economy of the Canada, and it's a very serious concern. And what we see about the unwillingness of Canadian, the Liberal Party, Liberal government, to enforce the IRGC terrorism as a terrorist organization, it raises some serious questions, some serious concerns that why they resist to that. There is something that already passed as a motion in Parliament, and they resist to that, despite all the facts, all what happened, and it raises some serious question in public mind. Well, maybe they are under influence of the money comes from Iran. That's a question, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And well, you say that the government is naive. Well, the government shouldn't be naive. Otherwise, it's not a government.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The next family member of Flight PS-752 victim is Mr. Jawad Soleimani, who lost his wife on Flight PS-752. He's also the chair of fact-finding committee for Association of Families of Flight PS-752. Time is yours, sir.
Thank you, Sergeant. At first, I'm going to talk about Flight PS-752 and why it was a heinous crime and our demands from the Canadian government. And then I will talk a little bit about Bloody November 2019 and why it is necessary to release to IRGC as a terrorist entity in Canada. As you know, on January 8, 2020, the Iranian regime knowingly kept the airspace open amid significant military tension between Iran and US after Iran attacked US military bases in Iraq. And the United Nations Special Rapporteur, Dr. Agnes Callas, on February 2021, in her comprehensive report, called Iran's report on the downing of Flight PS-752 contrived, misleading to deceive the international community. She clarified that as long as the Iranian regime does not answer numerous questions surrounding the downing of Flight PS-752, the intentionality scenario is very serious and must be investigated. In her interview with CBC, Ms. Callas explained that the onus is on Iran to prove that the downing of Flight PS-752 wasn't intentional. Honorable Michael Chong, the Iranian regime murdered our loved ones, hijacked many funerals for their propaganda by writing down congratulations on your martyrdoms on their coffins, detained and tortured some families, imprisoned many protesters against the intentional downing of Flight PS-752, blocked impartial and credible investigations. And now there is still no truth, no accountability, and no justice for the victims of Flight PS-752, their families, and all Canadians who have been impacted by this atrocity. I'd like to thank the Canadian government for offering some families of Flight PS-752 victims new ways to get permanent residency. But it's very important to know that this new policy announced yesterday is for some families, not all families, like families of international students, victims of Flight PS-752. Again, I thank the Canadian government for this new policy, but there is an important but. Bringing justice and discovering the truth are way more important than offering permanent residency for families of victims. the Association of Families of Flight PS752 victims, which represents more than 150 families of PS752 victims, recently started a campaign to write a letter to Canadian officials to pursue justice for the flight PS752 victims. Sergeant, someone, I think Mr. Matt Buzendi, should mute himself.
Sorry, I can't talk right now. I'm going to join you guys later.
Okay, thank you.
You have 2 minutes, sir.
Okay, sure.
Thank you so much.
So, our demands from the Canadian government are very clear. Formation of joint investigation team with all affected countries, imposing Magnitsky Act's sanction on key members of the regime, and taking the case to International Court of Justice, and listing the IRGC as a terrorist organization in Canada. It's not just about flight PS752. For instance, in November 2019, Iranian regime killed more than 100,000 protesters in the streets, and now their families are under pressure. And there are actually several new research by independent research like Mr. Ammar Maliki that even the number of murdered person is more around I think 8,000, and human rights organizations like Amnesty International should actually consider these new research and reevaluate their statistics about the number of individuals killed by the regime in bloody November 2019.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think the IRGC, in a nutshell, the IRGC is the repressive arm of the regime. It's the entity responsible for many murders and heinous crimes and the continuous violence in and outside Iran. And to list this entity as a terrorist organization is the smallest step towards justice for those whose lives have been and continue to be violated by this brutal force of repression. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are going to hear a follow-up from the Honorable Michael Chong, and we will thank him for his presence here today. Time is yours, Your Honor.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for your interventions and for your advice. We share your concerns. We've been long calling for the government of Canada to list the IRGC as a terrorist organization, which would put additional pressure on the regime and make it clear that their actions are unacceptable. We also believe that Magnitsky sanctions should be applied against individuals that have committed gross human rights violations. We think that the government more generally needs to introduce tougher legislation, regulation, and enforcement of money laundering rules, anti-money laundering rules here in Canada. Ali, I think, was talking about this. Canada has become a haven for money laundering and snow washing of proceeds of criminal activity, both state-sponsored criminal activity as well as individual criminal activity. And some of that involves members of individuals who are close or affiliated with the Iranian regime here in Canada. Transparency International recently ranked Canada at the bottom of the list of all G20 countries due to its failure to meet the G20's anti-money laundering commitments. In 2016, there was a report that identified Canada as a laggard. It was the Financial Action Task Force, which was an intergovernmental organization here that evaluates compliance. And recently, in the United Kingdom, an organization called the Tax Justice Network just last year concluded that Canada has long had a history of in the development of tax havens, and today is becoming known as a destination for money laundering. due to weak rules over corporate transparency and beneficial ownership. Our weak anti-money laundering laws provide criminals with anonymity to not get caught, and if they are caught, likely not to be prosecuted. The State Department of the United States has identified Canada as being weak in enforcing anti-money laundering rules. And I mention all of this because we know that sanctions are effective. We know that sanctions can take some time to have their full impact, but we do know that they will not work if countries like Canada are the leaky sieve that allow illicit proceeds of crime to flow through into the global financial system. And so I think Ali raised the point. I think it's a very good one, that we have to get serious about cracking down on money laundering and get serious about prosecuting those who would try to use Canada as a conduit through which they would park their illegal proceeds of the crimes that they have been committing. So we are also very much of the view that needs to be a priority for the government. Unfortunately, other than announcing money to tackle this issue, there's been no action on this for the last 6 years. And so that's something we are very much committed to, because we have to uphold human rights, but also ensure the integrity of our financial system here in Canada. And so I appreciate all the advice that you have given me today. Rest assured, we will continue to fight for you. Javed, I think you mentioned the announcement of the government yesterday. We applaud that. We think it's a good step in the right direction, but we also think that more needs to be done. And in particular, we need to seek justice for the victims, justice for the loved ones that you lost just over a year ago. And so I'll close by saying, once again, my deepest sympathies on your loss. It's something that you never get over, but it's also something that becomes easier with each passing day, and the memories you have of your loved ones will stay with you forever. I know that. I think about my parents often, and there is always a deep sorrow that I never had the chance to say goodbye to them. But I think of them fondly, and in time, the wound that I felt when I lost my parents in car accidents has lessened, and my memories of them have grown fonder. And so I know it's easy for me to say that because it happened so long ago, but I truly hope that as the months and years go by, that you will see that the wound you feel from this will get less sharp and less painful. And so once again, my sympathies, and we will do everything we can here in Ottawa to fight for justice for you and your families.
Thank you so much. The Honourable Michael Chong, Member of the Canadian Parliament, Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Vice Chair of Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. We appreciate your presence today, and thank you so much for all your efforts on behalf of my community.
Sarah, may I say something?
Sure, go ahead. It's just the Honourable Michael Chong has to catch a flight.
Okay, so very quick. Thank you, sir. I'm so sorry for the loss of your parents and accidents. When we are talking about bringing justice for Flight PS752, it's not just about families of victims, or it's not just about those innocent. It's about all of us. as long as we have a government like the Iranian regime murdering people, innocent people over international airport, the world is not a safe place for all of us. So bringing justice is about all of us. And thank you so much for all your efforts and all you have done for Flight 375.
Thank you so much. We are going to hear from our expert. We have a special guest joining us from Hague, Netherlands. Damon Golriz is a lecturer at the Hague University. He frequently lectures on Iran affairs at the Faculty of Governance and Global Affairs at Leiden University. Golriz has a degree in mechanical engineering, followed by studies in political science and philosophy from Leiden University. He is also a research fellow at Leiden University's Lectorate Research Group on International Peace, Justice, and Security. In addition to his academic work, he regularly contributes to various Dutch, English, and Persian print and news platforms. Damon, last year, after the downing of Flight PS-752 by IRGC missiles, you appeared on Canada's CBC. Since the beginning, you have believed that the Islamic Republic of Iran has shut down Flight PS-752 on purpose. Why do you think they committed this crime? And as an expert, what are your suggestions for holding the regime and IRGC accountable? Time is yours, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this valuable and important conference. Let me start with delivering my deepest sympathy and condolence to the families of the lost one. But by downing the Ukrainian plane, I think this is a national tragedy for many Iranians, but also probably a national tragedy for countries where, like Canada, like other countries like Ukraine. So I'm happy that you guys have organized this conference, and I hope that you keep on going, because talking about it, even if it's difficult to adopt the motion 754, I think it's more important to create a ground to influence the public, the politic, and the other sectors of the society in Canada, but also internationally, the media, to not to forget what happened to those people who died in the Ukrainian crash caused by the IRGC. So to get back to your question, I had this feeling that this such an action cannot be the beginning, cannot be something by human error. And it was very interesting for me to, 4 months ago, I saw this interview by the Canadian Foreign Minister with CBC, in which he was asked whether he believes that the downing of the Ukrainian plane by IRGC missiles was caused by human error. And he said, no, I don't believe that. As you probably know, because I saw it on your on different website, also on your social media. So that's an important one. That means that not only Ukraine officials, but also the Canadian do not believe that it was caused by human error. So what would be the rationale of the Iranian Republic, Islamic Republic, the IRGC, to shut down the Ukrainian plane by purpose? That's the question I would like to address briefly, and maybe we can discuss it if there's time. So if you look at the sequences of the events before and after attacking Major General Qasem Soleimani in Iraq by the Trump administration, you can probably recall that a few months before that attack, Mr. Trump was warning the Iranians that if any American citizen would be killed by the Iranian fire or the proxies of the Islamic Republic's Shiite proxies in the region, that if any American citizen would be killed by Iranian, then 52 targets inside Iran would be hit. And 52 was the number that was in remembrance of the 52 hostages, US hostages in the beginning of the Islamic Revolution. So this 52 is an important thing because, of course, many people, also the Iranian officials, you could read in their outlets, in the news outlets, in their interviews, that they didn't really take that seriously. Because it was Trump, it was the way he communicated with the media through his social media, especially Twitter, and it didn't really become a serious threat by Mr. Trump for IRGC for killing American citizens. It was at least more than 500 Americans were killed by Qasem Soleimani during the 2003 and 2011, the times of the Iraq war. So such a threat could not be materialized. It was just a social media, a media stunt, probably, that many Iranian officials thought. And that really changed after killing of Qasem Soleimani. So what happened after the killing of Qasem Soleimani was that we know now there are reports that say that there are reports that actually show us that Mr. Trump sent a letter to the Iranian officials through the Swiss embassy. And in that letter, he literally and concretely made clear that if there will be a retaliation for killing of Mr. Soleimani and any American would die, it was just the day or maybe a few hours after attacking Mr. Soleimani, then Ayatollah Khamenei would be attacked. Ayatollah Khamenei would be killed by Mr. Trump. So that's a different level of threatening the Iranians by this letter, and after mentioning the 52 targets that would be hit inside Iran if Iran kills any American. So the thing we changed was that making such a threat to the most powerful man in Iran, that without him, the future, the existence of the Islamic Republic would be a question, would be threatened. After killing Mr. Soleimani, which is materialized, now it shows that Trump is, let's say, crazy enough, or that Mr. Trump has the will and the power and the capability to fulfill such a threat if indeed any Iranian would be killed. Many US citizens would be killed by retaliation by the IRGC on the killing of General Soleimani. A few days later, IRGC sent out more than 16 ballistic missiles to the US military compound in Al-Assad. And fortunately, no Americans were killed. But you could imagine that sending ballistic missiles to a place where American soldiers are stationed is quite risky. I mean, you could not, even though they have took some measures, American knew about it. Iranian had informed the Iraqi government so that the Iraqi government would inform the Americans a few hours before the attack. You could imagine that this could cause a killing of the American soldier. And by killing American soldier, that would mean that probably Trump would fulfill his promise written by the letter to the Swiss embassy and would target Ayatollah Khamenei. It is in that light, I think, that one of the scenarios that could be by downing by purpose the Ukrainian airplane could be to create a national tragedy in a way that even in a way that if there is a small chance that the American soldier would be killed by the IRGC missiles, then the national tragedy, the media war that could start, and also would postpone any reaction by Mr. Trump in attacking Ayatollah Khamenei, and even maybe further than that, 52 Americans. So to probably that could be one of the reasons that I think, if you just look at the sequences of events, could have been the way that the Iranian government used human shields as a way to guarantee its existence and to guarantee that if an American would die, then such a national tragedy could postpone any reaction or retaliation reaction by Trump in those days. And we could now see that yes, the events really changed. That we didn't talk. Nobody even really talked about the consequences of the attack to Ain al-Assad, which is quite important if you look at it strategically. If you look at it from different angles, also to show how powerful the missiles by the Iranian regime are at this moment. But we all were mourning. We were all quite shocked by what happened to the airplane, and which took the Iranian government 3 days before they, after denying that it was downed by IRGC missiles. This what I'm trying to explain here. It can be one of the explanations, one of the rationale of the IRGC to do such a thing. If you present such a scenario to a Western, probably a Western educated person, they may probably be surprised. Why would such a government do such a scenario, unfold such a scenario? But I think if you look at the past 40 years, the way the Islamic Republic, the strategy they had in fighting against Saddam, the way they have been using many human as shields to guarantee the ideology of the Velayat Faqih, and how many children were used as soldiers, not only Iranians, but also the children from Afghanistan in the war in Syria, but also Iranians in the war against Saddam. You could say that the apocalyptic way of thinking about politics could create such a scenario to just postpone any reaction, retaliation by Trump if a U.S. citizen would die, U.S. soldier would die. So,
thank you so much.
Yeah, this was my I hope I try to keep it brief. And so, if there's any question, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Damon Golriz, lecturer at The Hague University. There is a question for both family members of Flight PS752. I think I'm going to ask that first from Javad. The question is, hypothetically, if the federal government of Canada does not take any considerable action regarding Flight PS752, what is the next step for families of the victims?
Thank you.
Javad, it's actually for Javad.
Oh yeah, it's for Javad. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, you can go first, Mr. Golriz, if you'd like.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know it wasn't my question, but I will keep it very brief.
Yep.
There is this interesting story about Henry Ford, who is the founder of the Ford Motor Company, the cars, as you know. And they asked him, how do you solve complex grade problems, technical problems? And he answered by, you have to break it down, differentiate it in small questions, in short, brief, concrete, small questions, and answer those questions, and the big question will be solved integrally. I think that's the way to move forward. I think talking about, as we are doing now, to create a narrative, to make it a thing, and to make it a way to discuss from different angles in the upcoming years, is the way the politics in the Western countries like Canada work. it needs a way to politicize it, to make it a matter of constituency of the politician, and in that way to bring the media with new facts and new stories, and that will at the end help to address such a question.
Thank you so much. Java, time is yours.
Thank you. That's a good question and a strategic question. Over the past 16 months, we have been in full cooperation with the Canadian government at different levels, different issues. We have been very clear and frank about our demands, and we told them that we're not gonna just cooperating without any specific achievements. I think we can judge Canadian government after the Canadian forensic team report coming in the next few weeks. After that report, the Canadian government is going to take some action based on the report, and then we can judge to see exactly where is the Canadian government, whether they are in the right side of the history or not. Over the past 16 months, we have been pushing the Canadian government, and I think we had some achievement. For instance, at first they were just saying that, okay, we're going to get good compensation for families of victims, compensation. And we told them it's a little bit offending. And now, as you know, they are more talking about actually bringing justice and discovering the truth. They formed a forensic team, Canadian forensic team for independent investigation. They appointed Mr. Goodell, the special advisor of Prime Minister on this case, which was a great step toward discovering the truth and bringing justice, but it wasn't enough. They should have done more. We keep pushing the Canadian government, like this campaign recently started at the Association of Families of Life Cases and Victims. I think it was very great because all Canadians, all people all around the world now can actually send a letter to Canadian officials to pursue justice and discover truth for families of victims. It doesn't matter where they live. And our demands are very clear from the Canadian government. And in our reply to, in our statement to about the Iran's final report, we clearly told the Canadian government, please do the negotiation in less than 3 months. We are not going to wait forever for you to do something for this case. Thank you.
Mr. Gorgi, what do you think, hypothetically, if the federal government of Canada does not take any considerable action regarding Flight PS752, what is the next step for families of the victims?
Actually, as Jawad explained, the Association of the Families Victims Family, well, they have some plans for, I think, waiting for the report, the final report, investigating report of the government, and finally, as what actually have done the government of Canada since the tragedy. If they do ineffective actions again, I think the families should go to the public opinions, to the media, and to the opposition parties to take the serious measures against the actual government of Canada, or even they express their concerns, and through the election, the upcoming elections in November, October or November. So because the government of Canada, Liberal government of Canada, it was so effective, so ineffective actually, that it cannot handle the situation. So it seems they are not qualified to be in power as a government. So that's my point.
Thank you so much. Damon, there is a question from you. How did designation of IRGC as a listed terrorist entity by previous U.S. administration affect the activities of this organization, especially in the Middle East region?
Very good question. Very good question indeed. I think the best way to measure whether this was a successful designation or not is by measuring at what it caused. What it didn't cause was a third world war, as many apologists were saying in the media. Many apologists of the Islamic Republic were arguing that this will make the IRGC start a war, a third world war with the US. It didn't happen. Even after that, Qasem Soleimani was attacked by the US administration of President Trump. So it didn't cause any retaliation. At the same time, it offered the US government a web of possibilities to create a wall of sanctions and also break the taboo of IRGC internationally in a way that the IRGC is not the same as it was before the designation as a terrorist organization, where there was no retaliation by doing that. So this web of sanctions is now exactly the reason why the Islamic Republic has its fourth round of negotiation in Vienna to basically have the IRGC off the list of this as a terrorist organization by the US. And I think domestically in Iran, so I talked about regionally, internationally, and domestically in Iran, it really changed the paradigm. It really changed the paradigm of for many Iranians now, and you can see it from the way they address the presidential election in a month. Many Iranians domestically do not believe that solving the problem goes through the ballot of the Islamic Republic. They see IRGC as the biggest deep state. Even the reformists are saying that there is a biggest deep state that basically is trying to, besides the government, which is officially has the governance of Iran. IRGC is the one who decides on anything, has about 35 to 40% of the economy in its hands. So it really changed the paradigm by designation of IRGC as a terrorist organization by Mr. Trump, I think. But it's difficult also, if I may make that last comment, I think we have to understand, I think you have to understand that it's difficult for Canada, with so many Iranians related and somehow connected with the Islamic Republic, to prove such a motion. So that's why I mentioned the phrase about Henry Ford, by breaking it down and try to address small questions and small matters, and that at the end, having IRGC in the box by Canadian government could be easier.
Thank you. There is another question for you, Damon. Is it possible that JCPOA revival or the Iran deal may have any influence in terms of compromising and delaying justice in the case of Flight PS752 restoration for justice?
I think it makes it easier to somehow, let's say, to divert attention, international attention, the media attention from what happened to the Ukrainian flight. So it has not a positive impact, I think, on that matter. But it also depends on the Canadian, Ukrainian governments. And also, I think all of us, the Iranian diaspora, whether we can still keep this matter divided from the nuclear issue and also differentiated from the daily issues and focus on politicizing it and making it really a matter, as Mr. Gurji was explaining, to create a momentum every day and put it in the media. So it has, I don't think it has a positive impact. I think it has a negative impact on this matter if there is the revival of JCPOA.
Thank you so much. Java, there is they're asking you, could you please explain the plan that Minister Mendicino mentioned yesterday and approved yesterday regarding granting permanent residency for families of Flight PS-752 victims? They want to know more about it. Could you explain that, please?
Sure. As I said in my speech, we thank the Canadian government for offering new ways for some families of victims to get permanent residency, but it's important to know that it's not for all families of victims. It's only for families of Canadian and permanent resident victims of Flight PS-752, and it's we really appreciate that, because many families in Iran are under pressure by the Iranian regime. For instance, over the past months, the Iranian regime tried to convince families of victims to get compensation, to close the case with just compensation, or forcing some families of victims to register a complaint in domestic courts in Iran to just close the case in Iran without any international court. So it's very important. It's very helpful for seeking justice. But as I said earlier, it's not enough. There is a lot of things that need to be done by the Canadian government, like taking the regime to International Court of Justice, like putting more pressure on Iranian regime by applying Magnitsky Act or listing IRGC as a terrorist entity in Canada, or formation of a joint investigation team with other countries, especially Ukraine. That was great, good step, but honestly, many other things are more important than permanent residency for families of victims. I talked to some families yesterday, and they told that, okay, so let's say we have permanent residency status in Canada. What we're going to do without our loved ones, without knowing the truth, without knowing what exactly happened on that night, without seeing justice served. So, yep.
Mr. Gorgi, what are your thoughts about what happened yesterday? And regarding the same question, Minister Mendicino and the government is willing to grant permanent residency to family members of Flight PS-752 victims. What do you think about it?
I think it has nothing to do with the pursuing justice, what the families, what we want. And well, I think it's a positive step. It can help, but it's not at all in line with what we are seeking for justice. So, well, I think it's not that important actually as an action.
There is only 1 minute left to our event today. The final question is from both of you, Javad and Mr. Gorgi. Do you think that the Ukrainian government has taken stronger action against the Islamic Republic of Iran when it comes to the case of Flight PS-752, or the Canadian government, in your opinion, as family members?
Arijan, you can go first and I can cheat. I can go first. Okay, no problem. It's a tough question. Honestly, I don't have enough information to answer this question, but it seems that in media, in public, the Ukrainian government was stronger than Canadian government to put pressure on Iranian regime and pursue justice. I hope we can see better actions from Canadian government after releasing the Canadian forensic team report in coming few weeks.
And you, Mr. Gorgi?
I think the Ukrainian government did much better than government of Canada and what we really expected from the government of Canada. So that's very unfortunate that a lot of Canadian residents of Canada, they are lost, but the government of Canada actually didn't deal very well with the situation, not very well, but very, unacceptable way to this situation. So that's, I can say it's really, we are disappointed with what the government of Canada does. They have done some superficial things, not the real actions, what they needed really to, because after 15 months, there's no court, nothing, no action going to court, anything in the horizon. So that's unfortunate from the government of Canada. They didn't take responsibility and doing enough things for pursuing justice.
Thank you so much. Mr. Damon Golries, lecturer at The Hague University, who joined us from The Hague, Netherlands, Mr. Ali Gorgi, Pune Gorgi's uncle, and Mr. Jawad Soleimani, who lost his wife Elnaz Nabi on flight PS 752. We also want to thank the Office of the Honorable Michael Chong for being creating this opportunity that he could be present here. Also, we wanted to thank all of our non-Persian speaking audience as well. So we will have we will have 2 more programs for this month, Friday, May 21st and Friday, May 28th. We will send you all the information for future events as well. Thank you so much. خیلی ممنونم از همگی شما عزیزان.